After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and John Palicki, two high school head coaches talking basketball on the court, off the court, and anything in between.
On today's episode of the After the Timeout podcast, we sit down with Coach Stephanie Kuzmanic, head girls basketball coach at Leyden High School in Franklin Park, Illinois. Coach Kuzmanic also coaches AAU basketball for All In Athletics. Prior to being head coach at Leyden, Coach Kuzmanic played at Carthage College and Leyden High School. We talked to Coach Kuzmanic about becoming a head coach at a very young age, being from a basketball family, creating a positive culture in your program, what it takes to play at the collegiate level, and timeout development. Enjoy the show.
Coach, it's awesome to have you on today. We've been looking forward to it all week. We've been just giving all of our coaches that come on a chance to maybe highlight what they've been doing in their program now that the season started. Maybe some things that you were doing in the off season, because we had a long off season, right, during COVID. I think me and John have kind of thought that's a valuable thing to talk to other coaches about, because you can always pick up something and maybe use it down the road. So, just kind of what's going on in your program, what were you doing to prepare even when we weren't allowed to play, things like that.
Well, I think when this COVID stuff first started going on in the spring, obviously there were a lot of unknowns, but I think most of us thought that maybe we would miss camp, but we'd be back in the fall, no problem. So I definitely didn't expect it to go on as long as it did. And when they told us we couldn't have summer camp, I'm sure a lot of teams did the same thing, but we did a lot of virtual workouts. I met with a lot of the kids a couple of times a week. We would do ball handling and some shooting for kids who maybe had hoops in their driveway. Try to do some just team meetings, not even with the ball, just to really talk and discuss things and, help with their mental health that way, just to see other people on a screen. So we did things like that. And then finally by fall, we were lucky enough to at least have some contact days. And thank goodness for those, because we definitely needed every single one of those days. So really just trying to check in and keep the kids updated about what was going on and really give them some hope and something to look forward to, because I think a lot of kids really checked out mentally because they thought, well, there's not going to be a season. So why am I going to come on this Zoom workout? Why am I going to meet with the team? Like, we're not going to play this year. So I think trying to keep them bonded and engaged so that in the chance where we did come back, that they were kind of ready to go, not just physically, but mentally too.
So, let's kind of transition. So, Todd and I are both obviously head coaches, but, I've known your family for a long time, and you graduated from college as a player and basically became a head coach immediately. So, what were the hardest things to do to transition from being a player to coach? And then kind of what were some of the challenges and things you learned in that very first year at the front of the bench instead of on the court?
It's funny because I was still student teaching while my job at Leyden started. So I got my job and I was supposed to be at summer camp working the Leyden basketball camp the first week of June. And I was student teaching up in Kenosha by Carthage, and they don't get out till the middle of June. So I remember it was an issue, and my professor at Carthage, I don't want to say threatened, but almost threatened to fail me from the student teaching program because they said I couldn't miss any days of student teaching at the end of the year. So I was kind of in a pickle because, this was my real job. I just signed a contract to start working. I need to get down there. And obviously I was excited to come meet my players and see what the program would look like. But I still had responsibilities to student teach. So it was really difficult. I was going in between Kenosha and Northlake, just, trying to go to class with my seminar, plus student teach, plus coach on the weekend. So it was kind of crazy. It was a lot of fun, but it was definitely a difficult transition. I mean, you guys know, playing at a high level for 4 years in college, you have the mindset of a college player. So I was super excited and, really grateful that Leyden gave me an opportunity to be a head coach at 22. I think they know there would be some growing pains, regardless of what level of player I was. I had some coaching experience before, but obviously not to run a whole program. So I think for me, it was just really hard to adjust to the high school skill level, because I came in there as this young, hungry coach, and I was so excited. I had all these great ideas, and I was like, I'm so excited to run a certain offense, and I had all these plays and sets and defensive schemes. And then you meet your team, and you're like, okay, we need to we need to take it back a little bit and figure out what they can do. So I think that it took me a few years to realize that as a coach, you need to cater your offense and your schemes to your players instead of trying to fit your players into what kind of schemes you run. I think that's something that I struggled with, and I had to really scale back my ideas and find out what they could do and what they couldn't do and what I could implement to make them successful. I think that was probably the biggest thing for me.
Okay, so you come from, and John, we talked about this yesterday. I didn't know this about you, but you come from a basketball family. Like all your siblings played at a high level. What were some of the things that led you and your sisters to success? And like you kind of started it, right? I believe you're the oldest, so you kind of started that path. So kind of talk about how that was like, with your younger sisters, and then, was there ever pressure, or was it just a friendly, sibling competition?
Honestly, I have to credit my parents 100% on getting us into basketball and keeping it going. Especially my mom, she coached us all growing up. So my parents actually ran the Wheeling feeder program for 10 years. So they took it over and they put, blood, sweat, and tears literally into that program. And I think that's what kind of got us going. And ever since that, we fell in love with the game as well. So I think that kind of just escalated it. And obviously that whole feeder program was what really set a foundation for us to be successful later on in high school and our high school team. I would say, I don't think there was pressure for me. Because I was the oldest. I don't know if that, is surprising or not, but I think because I was the first one to do everything, there wasn't really an expectation. I was the first one, obviously, to get into the feeder program. And then since I was the first one doing everything, I started a little later. I didn't play AAU till after my freshman year. That was my first year of AAU. Whereas my younger sisters, started in 5th, 6th grade. I was the first one to play in college. So we didn't know much about the recruiting process or how it worked or how to respond to coaches, how to find an AAU team. So I think my parents definitely pushed us to play as much as we can and be successful. But I don't think they were to the point where they put pressure on us to be good, So I think that was like a good medium. And I can't speak for my sisters, but I think there was probably maybe more pressure possibly on them because we set that bar really high. And, we were the first team at Wheeling to go downstate and whatnot. So I think maybe it put more pressure on them that they kind of felt like they had to continue that and set that high bar. So I can't speak for them, but it was definitely my parents that got us into it. And we just all kind of fell in love with the game. And now we're a crazy basketball family, and March Madness and those things are bigger in our house than Christmas Eve, honestly. So we look forward to those kind of things.
The real question is though, who's got the one-on-one record?
I was waiting for that.
Who holds the one-on-one record?
I will say we have had some super intense one-on-one driveway games growing up. And honestly, my sisters hated playing against me, not because I was, better or worse than them, just because I'm by far the most competitive. If you ask my sisters, I will pull shirts, push them to the floor, play dirty, do whatever I have to do to get the W. So I think they would get frustrated because I was older and I didn't take it easy on them. I beat up on them like crazy, and I tried to push them in that way. So we played a lot of driveway games and things like that. And, it's interesting because we are all 3 different players. I played point guard, so I did a lot more driving kickouts, and assists was kind of my thing in college. My middle sister, Kelly, she kind of played more of like a 3-4. And she was, a little bit bigger. She was a post kind of. And then Deanna, the youngest one, she was like a pure shooter. She's a phenomenal shooter. So we all kind of bring different things to the table. So, one-on-one was interesting.
So we should never go up against you guys in a 3-on-3. Right?
You know what? We always joke with my mom that we're really upset that they didn't have Deanna like a year or two earlier. Kelly and I played 2 years together. in high school. And then Deanna and Kelly played 1 year together. And we just think it would have been awesome if we could have all three been in the starting lineup together at once.
No doubt.
So we'll go through your playing and then into your coaching experience. But I'm sure you took things from your playing experience into coaching. So obviously when you were at Wheeling's not known as a basketball powerhouse, as you and I very well know, but what were the characteristics of your guys' team during your state run? Like, take out skill, obviously, we could go through all the skilled players, but what were some other characteristics that led to that team being so successful?
That team was so special just because of the level of dedication. And again, I really think that it goes back to that foundation from the feeder program that, again, I really have to accredit my parents for that, for kind of building that. I mean, there was times my mom would go into the local middle schools and pick kids out, and try to get them to join basketball. Like, as you guys know, if you look up that state team, there's no secret Ashley Wilson was, one of the best players maybe the MSL has ever seen. Yep. She was phenomenal. She didn't pick up a ball till 6th grade. My mom walked in to a gym at Holmes Middle School and called her mom and said, "Hey, we want this kid to play feeder." And I think because of that, we had played together for so long at Wheeling that I think we had such a genuine friendship with everybody off the court. So I think by the time we got to high school, we just trusted each other so much and we wanted to win together. So it was just such an unselfish team. And everybody was really happy, for other people when, it didn't matter who was leading score or these things. We just wanted to win. And I remember when we were in maybe 5th or 6th grade, every year my parents would take like a 12-passenger van down to ISU and take the whole feeder team, and we would go watch the state games. And we'd watch when Buffalo Grove made it down to state when they were older than us. And we'd watch the Bolingbrookes and the Whitney Youngs. And I think that just inspired us to want to have that same goal. We watched all these kids from 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And I remember in like 7th grade looking at my mom and just being like, I want to play here one day. I want to make it down to this court. And I think that fueled our fire. When we were juniors, or I was a junior, that was when we had that 09 team that went down state. I mean, we were like 33-2 that year. Mm-hmm. And anytime we did lose, I mean, we treated it like a college team. I mean, we watched film on our own. And at that time, huddle and those things weren't even out. We would go scout. If we lost the game, we had a group chat with the captains and would say, "Hey, let's go and watch film. Let's go in and shoot. Let's go in and condition." Like, we didn't even need, and I loved Shelly Legal. She was an awesome coach. I loved playing for her, and she didn't even need to tell us. I think she'll say that too. She didn't need to get into us. If we ever lost, we were just as hard on ourselves, and we would come together and try to figure out how we could improve for the next time. So that was really kind of our goal.
All right. So let's kind of transition to your college playing and how that goes into your student athletes today. So I really feel like, I don't know how it's changed, but kids don't necessarily know as much of what goes into a typical college day, right? As a college athlete, I played college baseball in the CCIW as well. I was at Elmhurst, and you played at such a high level. You played in a great program, a great conference. What was your typical day like as a college athlete in season? And obviously you can come at it from the AAU perspective as well. I don't know if athletes like, I want to play in college, but they don't necessarily realize whatever level you're at, what goes into a typical day.
Oh man. Playing college is it's draining. And obviously physically, when you guys know that when you play college athletics, I think your body ages like 10 years in those couple of years that you're there. By senior year, it's not like, "Oh, you're hurt." It's like, "Oh, what's wrong with you? I have tendonitis, I have this, I'm playing on a broken foot." It's always something. So I think that kids expect it to be physically demanding, and I think they expect it to be a lot of time. I don't think every kid understands or is ready for the emotional, part of that. And it's very emotionally draining. I think a lot of kids have trouble with resilience because they were all the best player at their high school. And then you go to college and it's very hard to get playing time, especially when you are a freshman, sophomore, and kids are used to playing, 30 out of 32 minutes of a high school game. And then they get to college and they're on the bench. And you have to remember that every single person on that college roster was a star on their high school team. And I think a lot of people have trouble accepting that. And then, this is what I explained to my AAU and my high school kids that we send to college, is that you have two options when you get there. Either you let it get to you and then you just kind of quit by sophomore year because you couldn't handle it and it was too, taxing on you, or you say, okay, I'm not the best right now. What do I need to do to get there? And if you're not willing in college to put in the extra time, I mean, it's not enough. High school, you can play some AAU, you can show up, you can probably dominate a little bit. College, it's not that way. Everybody's bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. And, regardless, like you said, Division 1, 2, 3, JUCO, it doesn't matter. It's all still a much higher level than high school. So I think you have to really be willing to put that extra time in. And, I also think there is a big misconception with Division 3 athletics, especially. I chose obviously to go Division 3, and we were, obviously ranked nationwide, and we had transfers on our team that played Division 1. And, I'm not trying to compare, and I'm not saying obviously that Division 3 is a higher level of competition. Division 1 definitely is, but I think people think that if I go D3, it's going to be really easy and I'll play and I don't have to work as hard. And, we're not playing Division 1, but we're working just as hard and just as much. I mean, in preseason, we had 3 days. We had a 5 a.m. wake up call. We were hitting the track. We were running wind sprints on the track. Then we'd go to class. Then we'd have to lift at like 11. Then we go back to class. Then we'd have open gyms at night and, conditioning, agility. So we're working just as hard and just as often. The difference is we're not getting paid to do it. So in my eyes, sometimes that's almost even more admirable, the fact that we're doing this for pure love of the game. And we're putting our bodies and minds and all this through, this exhausting season just because we really, really love the game of basketball. So I think that you just really have to be strong mentally, and you have to make sure that you're putting in the time to get where you want to be.
So let's kind of, we kind of went through your playing career. Let's kind of go into coaching. So something Todd and I have both noticed, and I've been a big fan of just your positive culture and some of the things that you do. And so I'm just curious, what are the key elements to your program culture that leads to your girls? You could tell your girls are close and it's a positive atmosphere. So what are some of the key elements to that?
I think that the biggest thing that has, worked for us is just getting buy-in from every kid on the floor. It's common for your starters or maybe, your top 8 rotation. They're going to buy in for the most part. It's easy for them to be engaged because they're playing, they're getting minutes, they're following along. It's really hard to keep 9 through 15 engaged when they might only get in a minute a game. They might not play for 5 games straight. And I think that's also where a lot of negativity comes in because coaching girls, I don't know if it's the same for boys, but coaching girls, I know a lot of the drama comes from playing time and who's playing and who's not, and who does coach like, who's coach going to play, and these things. So as you know, John,
Yep.
So I think it's really important to try to build that buy-in with every kid 1 through 15. And if you watch my, high school varsity team play, we might not be the most talented team on the floor, but I would say that 9 times out of 10, we are going to be the most energetic, the loudest, the hardest working, those kind of things. So that's something that I really, really push with them. Because, we don't have a lot of kids in the program, if, only a few in the entire program that play year round and play AAU and are, true ballers and love basketball and want to be there every second. So I think it's super important to try to build that positive culture so that they want to be there. And as you know, if you're not winning a lot of games, it makes it even harder for them to want to buy in and be there because it's tough to go back to back and play good teams and lose. So I really try to stress with them that we're not worried about wins and losses. We're worried about us and bettering ourselves and improving our skills and playing to the best of our ability. I told them, I don't care if, we're not as talented, but we need to make sure that we're working harder than anybody on the floor at all times.
So let's go through now. Let's say you do have a kid who comes to you and is like, Coach, I'm not playing, or a kid that's negative or a kid that's disruptive to that culture, kind of take us through, like, what would you do with that player?
I think it's really important to establish roles early on in the season. And I think a lot of the issues with playing time and whatnot sometimes come in because, coaches tell every kid at the beginning of the season, oh yeah, you're all going to play, you're going to be here, you're going to be here. And kids hear that. And then if they don't play, it's a letdown and they're upset. So we try to be very honest with them at the beginning of tryouts, and not in a harsh way, but just, hey, tell them straight up, hey, this is your role. And it's a very important role. And sometimes your role might be to be an amazing practice player and get the starters ready. Sometimes your role is to score 20 points a game. Sometimes your role is to go in there for 5 minutes and face guard the best player on the other team. But what we try to really implement is the fact that your role might be big or small, but every role is important, 1 through 15, every single one. And I think if you can get kids to buy into that and accept their role and do their role well, and make sure that every kid kind of feels important, to the team, I think that really, really helps build that culture. And, I really try to make it a point to not make it all about the starters and who's getting playing time. And, I try to make sure that we're focusing on every kid, even if they're not getting playing time, because if they don't feel like they're part of the team, that's when that negativity comes in, so we try to really establish their roles, and we have preseason meetings with them when we start tryouts. And then we always do a mid-season meeting where we just kind of give players the floor and we say, hey, you let us know, what do you think you're doing well? What do you think you need to work on? What do you need to see from us as coaches? What can we do to help you be more successful? And I think when we, kind of do that for them, I think that really makes them, kind of see that, hey, we're here for you guys. We're on the same team here. I think sometimes kids don't get playing time and they see it as, coach doesn't like me, coach doesn't want to give me a chance, and that thing. Whereas, we're all on the same team. We all have the same goal. We want to get better. We want to win games. And once I think we step back as coaches and say, hey, we're not perfect too, guys. You can tell us what you need from us and what's going to help you. I think they appreciate that a lot.
I like the idea of the mid-season meeting. That's a good idea.
And we do some postseason meetings too. And as far as the closeness, we do a lot of team bonding activities throughout the season. And, girls especially love those. But one of the coolest things that we have started the last couple of years is we do an overnight lock-in every year over winter break. So the girls love doing that. It's a lot of fun. We practice at like 10 p.m. They come in at literally 10 p.m. We practice till like 1 a.m. and then they shower and get ready. We order a bunch of pizzas and people bring food. And then we do a bunch of team bonding activities throughout the night. So we've done like scavenger hunts around the whole school. We've done like Jeopardy. Sometimes we watch film, look at stats. We've done Secret Santas. And the first year that we ran the lock-in, kids brought like blankets and pillows. And one girl actually brought an entire queen mattress. She was a total diva. Her dad came in and brought an entire queen mattress. So that was the first year. And then after that, no one's brought a single pillow or blanket because we don't sleep. It's an all-nighter. We go from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m., make breakfast. Parents pick them up at 8 a.m. And we try to make sure too, when we do activities, that we put kids that don't really talk together. And I think that helps, like, separate the, clickiness of their friends and put teams of kids who don't really talk. And I think that helps too, kind of build trust between everybody, from 1 to 15. That's always our thing. 1 to 15, 1 to 15.
So I want to talk about player development now, and we just talked about roles. So now we have those roles. And obviously you have two different, sets of player development, right? You have the high school aspect, and then you have the AAU aspect, which is very different. First, talk about your high school player development. Maybe what's your process? What are the core skills you're looking for your kids to have? Does it change, or, depending on your teams, things like that?
So for high school, I think you have to break down stuff obviously a lot more, because AAU players are used to, they play all year round. So they probably have a little bit more knowledge. And a lot of those AAU kids have, trainers and things like that. So For high school, we work a lot on skills, but also I think something that sometimes high school coaches don't always necessarily think about is just not only teaching skills like shooting mechanics and dribbling, but also concepts is a big one. And I think that was something I learned through my last couple years of coaching is that I've started to take less time on teaching actual sets and plays and spending more time on concepts. So we do a lot of 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 breakdown drills in practice. And we work on, we'll focus on a skill every day. So like today we're working on learning how to read screens and when to curl and when to slip the screen and when to actually roll and how to, do those things. And we'll spend, a ton of time in everything we do from like a shoot around drill to scrimmaging, everything will be around that skill. So we can really work on it. Or, we'll take a day to teach how to set different types of screens because, kids only set high ball screens, but what is a flex screen? I mean, we're teaching some concepts these kids have never heard of, teaching them how to set a UCLA screen. We've done an entire practice before on how to cut correctly. A lot of teams run 4 and 5 out and it seems really easy, pass and cut, but there's a difference between passing the ball and just putting your hands in the air and actually making a V cut or an in and out and getting in front of somebody and cutting with a purpose and things like that. So I've started to do a lot more skill/concept stuff. And I think it has helped tremendously because, when I first got there, a lot of teams, you can just say, hey, go 4 or 5 out and kids know how to play basketball and they know where to go. And, when I first got to my high school team, that wasn't a possibility because kids didn't really know the game. So I think as I've spent more time teaching them how to just play and like when to cut, when to curl, when to do those things, I think makes it so much easier when I put in sets because they start to realize that there's all these different options out of sets.
Okay, so let's bump that then to AAU. What now you get to AAU, you have those kids who are playing. Most likely they have that at least 1 or 2 really good skills.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your process when you get to your girls for your AAU team?
That's fun. It's interesting with AAU because everybody in AAU plays a little bit different, depending on where their high school is. And it's interesting too, because when I have my high school team, everybody's playing the same way and there's the same expectation because they're my kids and I'm telling them what I want from them. Whereas, you go to AAU and let's say I run something, or I'm in some kind of offense and I have this girl from this high school and her coach is telling her always do this on a screen. And this girl from this high school, her coach is telling her something different. So I think that's the kind of the challenging part of AAU is trying to mesh those kids. But it's fun. I mean, we go into training for AAU and it is really high level. It's a lot of fun just to work on more advanced skills, like not just going over, shooting mechanics and ball handling, but teaching, sometimes moves that these NBA guys are doing and teaching like split steps and pullbacks and different types of way to do step backs. So it's really fun. And, the AAU kids obviously are super engaged because they're making an effort to be there. So it's just fun to be able to kind of get into them and teach them some new stuff. And, we'll jump in there too sometimes and scrimmage with them, which is always fun as well.
So as Todd would say, let's kind of take away the fluff a little bit. So you talked about concepts and Todd and I are big on concepts in offense and defense and like you, very less about like this set or that set so kind of take us through like your key offensive concepts for your team, your high school team. Like what are you guys doing offensively at your core? Things might be tweaked every year based on personnel, of course, as we all do, but like what are those key concepts for you?
Well, as you said, it kind of depends on your team and notoriously the girls I've had have been, we're obviously much more talented defensively. We're usually a pretty fast team. So a lot of our offense comes from our defense. So we really in practice work a lot on like secondary break and transition and getting into an offense out of the fast break. But for our high school team, I think like less is more. Keeping it simple has been successful. So, different maybe quick hitters out of a 5 out or out of a 4 out set or out of like a 4 low set that they can just get into and kind of just play. So like I said, I think the concept helps because before we just run like a 1-hitter set. And if it wasn't open, they dribble back up to the top and say, set it up, try again. And I think now we're finally a little bit more advanced where we can run those sets. And then if the option's not there, it goes right into a 5-out or a 4-out, and they have different options. So we try to keep it simple, a lot of high ball screens with the post. I like a lot of double screens. I like that. I think I definitely got that from Tim Bernero, my Carthage coach. He had some really nice high-low sets. But, it kind of depends on personnel as well, because we are, usually a pretty tiny team. It's not often that we get like a true post. Like right now we don't have anybody 6 foot on the roster, and we normally don't. So, I love like a good high-low and stuff like that, but it's kind of difficult to run when you don't have a true post. So we like to go a lot of like 5-out. I play 5 guards a lot, honestly. That's the style of play I like to play. And a lot of dribble drive type things with that.
So then kind of the new thing Todd and I have been really talking about lately is how much time do we spend on like that quote unquote special teams area, out of bounds,
Yep.
Sideline out of bounds, baseline out of bounds, or those kind of things. Kind of take us through your philosophy on out of bounds plays, and how much time do you spend in practice, and kind of how do you teach those aspects?
I think that when I first started, I spent a lot more time on those. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I always feel like with high school, especially in this, pandemic season, things go so fast. And as long as the season is in 4 months, I always feel like it's impossible to get through everything if you want to do it right. Like my first couple of years, I would just, try to squeeze everything in as fast as I could, put in the press, put in the zone, put in a man, put in sets, put in inbounds. And I felt like I started to realize that if I focus a little bit on, picked 2 or 3 things that we could be really good at, instead of just having all these options and trying to throw all these things at them, I think that was a little bit hard for them. So I've caught myself spending a little less time on inbounds and things like that. I don't know if it's not on purpose. I think I just, get excited about when the offense starts to click and I start putting more time into that and creating sets off that. I kind of get addicted to that. So, and we put a lot of time into defense. I mean, as you know, you've seen us play. We like to press the whole game. We're very run and gun. We have some half court traps and things like that. So we work a lot, probably more on defense than anything, in running the break and transition.
So obviously, as we say to every guest, we're the After the Timeout podcast. So we love to talk to people about just during timeouts or after timeouts. So as we said in the beginning, you came to become a head coach at a very young age. So I'm just curious, if you could think back to your first year, kind of take us through how your timeouts were run. And then over the years, how have they developed, gotten better, more effective, more organized, or things you've changed just with timeouts?
I look back now that I've coached for a few years, and I know that my timeout management before was absolutely horrible. When you first start, you think you kind of know things. And then as I got older, I was like, wow, yeah, that was not good.
Yeah.
So I think like before I focused, like I spent so much of the time out yelling at them about what they did wrong. And as you guys know, like the timeouts go so fast. And if it's a 30-second timeout, it takes these kids 10 seconds to sit down and get their water. And then the refs with 15 seconds left are telling you, get them out, coach, get them out. So it's like a 5-second timeout. So I started to kind of realize that spending the 30 seconds yelling at them about what they did wrong, well, that's great. Now they're going to work hard, but they don't really know what to fix. So I think I've really shifted timeouts as just focus more on like trying to draw upsets, fix the issues, show kids where and when to rotate, and actually try to get something out of it. And then I also would say that I've definitely been better with managing timeouts. When I first started, it was like all or nothing. Like there'd be games where I feel like I used all my timeouts in the first quarter because I kept getting frustrated and I kept calling it like, run this. And I felt like every time they did something wrong, I had to like take a timeout because they really didn't know how to adjust on the fly. Even the good teams, it's difficult for high school kids for you to just, hey, let's run this, and then to kind of get in place. So I felt like I needed timeout every time. So I'd like burn all my timeouts and then I'd be screwed at the end of the game. Or it'd be the opposite where I'm like, I don't want to waste my timeout for anything. And then the end of the game comes and I'm full on. So I think I've just gotten better at learning when to take them. And then honestly, like letting kids play through stuff sometimes. And I think that was my problem, is I get so frustrated because, I have very high expectations, and I'm very I want to say particular when I coach. I expect a lot out of them. So I think I realized that sometimes, it's okay for them to make mistakes and like play through that and figure it out on their own instead of interrupting them every time they're making a mistake and burning those timeouts.
Well, nowadays we have the TV timeout too this year.
Yeah.
So the
And
5-minute
honestly, I
timeout.
hope they keep that and it's the 90 seconds makes a huge difference because it really is enough time what I've been doing now is before they go get their water, I'm doing like a 30-second timeout, like meet here first. And then you have the rest of the minute to go get your water, do your mass break. Otherwise they're like all over the place. So, it's tough to do that. So yeah, I'm loving the mass break timeouts. I hope they keep that.
All right. So at the end of every episode here, we do a top 5, right? So we thought it'd be fun with you to do the top 5 games you've played in as a player or coached in as a coach. Could be any combination of games, high school, college, wherever it may be. Your top AAU even, right? Maybe you went and battled out, some balled out against some team and you're like, man, this was a game. So your top 5.
Does this have to be in order or can I
no particular order,
Any
whatever.
order.
Doesn't have to be 1 through 5, just
hard. All right, I'll try to start with playing and then I'll go maybe to coaching. High school wise, I would say, we had a really good conference when I was in high school. The MSL was really at its peak. It's great now. There's a lot of good teams, but when I was in high school, almost every MSL team had at least a Division I player. We had like 3 in our start, every single person in our starting lineup in that 09 year. We all 5 played in college, and Elk Grove had like 2 Division I players, and BG had 5 players in their starting lineup that played in college, and Hersey, and everybody was just so good. It was so competitive. But I think high school, one of my favorite games when I was a sophomore, we played Buffalo Grove to get downstate, and we did end up losing that game. So maybe I shouldn't put in my top 5, but it was really cool. It was one of those games where, it was on TV. They did like that sportscasting, and our fans were amazing. We had this group of super fans. John, because you guys went to Wheeling as well, but we just had a group that was so dedicated. They went everywhere. We had all the guys with their shirts off and they had fat heads. And so it was a really cool game because it was packed. There was people standing on the sidelines, up top in the bleachers. There was 5+ D1 players on the floor between Buffalo Grove and us. So that was do you remember this, John?
Is that the game where at the end, Deneen held the ball for like a minute and a half?
It could have been. It was at a neutral site. I can't remember. It might have been Evanston.
Yeah, somewhere like that.
Yeah, and it was when I was a sophomore, and that was
Yeah.
we were, we had we could have made a state run then too, but Buffalo Grove ended up being us. They had the Mackey sisters, and they were phenomenal players. But it was just so fun, just because it was on TV and it felt like big time, and so many good players. And then I would say one more that sticks out for me from high school is our Final Four game against Bolingbrook. When we went downstate, going into state, I think we were maybe like 31-1, something like that. We'd only lost to Whitney Young, who also made it downstate. And at that time, Bolingbrook, they had Morgan Tuck, who went on to win 4 national championships with UConn, right, and she's in the WNBA. So obviously she's a phenomenal player. They had Ariel Massingale, who went to Tennessee and was a starting point guard at Tennessee. They had another girl who went to U of I. So they were completely stacked, and it was a really, really good game. And again, we lost that. I don't know why my top 5 games are losses, but it was just a fun because it was such a high level of competition. And like I said, we had so many fans in the crowd. They pretty much canceled school that day at Wheeling, and they had a send-off parade, and like half the school came down and was at the stand. So we ended up losing by 7. But then Bolingbrook the next night won the championship, and they beat Whitney Young by 25. And the next day we played for 3rd place, and we beat Geneva by 25. So that kind of felt more like, the state championship to us. So even though we lost, it was just really cool, to play against someone of like Morgan Tuck's caliber, and then watch her to go on to be undefeated for 4 years at UConn. So I would say that I would throw that in there too, which again, I don't know why I chose losses, but as far as college, I definitely have 2 games that stand out. These ones are wins. So My first one, when I was a sophomore in college, we played DePauw. Who, if you guys don't know, with girls Division III, DePauw is usually ranked top 5 in the country every year. They were number 1 in the country when we played them, and we played them at home. And they had some kind of crazy statistic that they hadn't lost a home game in like 42 games straight, something crazy like that. And it was to play to get into the Elite Eight, which the Carthage program has never been to an Elite Eight. So, we're playing, it's intimidating. We're playing the number 1 team in the country on their home floor. And that is a big downfall of D3 that, the way that it works with playoffs, it goes by region. So like our region might have regional might have the number 1, 5, 10, and 15 team. And then there's some schools on the East or West Coast that are getting a cakewalk to the tournament, but it all depends on the area. So we were playing DePauw in the Sweet 16, and it was just a really fun, close game. And they were up for most of it. And there was maybe like 30 seconds left in the game or something. And we were trailing the whole time. And, my sophomore year, I had much more of a like true point guard role of passing because we had so many good players. Like junior year, I had much more of, opportunities to score. So I really wasn't a big scorer my first 2 years. I really were just, drive and kick. And there was like 30 seconds left. And I hit this huge 3, and I didn't really shoot threes much until my junior year. And so we went up by like 1 with like 30 seconds left. We ended up winning the game. It was just this like awesome, huge upset. So it was really, really fun. And then the second one was probably my senior year. We had to play Hope College in the first round as well. And and Hope also another
D3 power.
Another D3 powerhouse, phenomenal program. And they were also ranked number 1. And so my senior year, I think going into that game, we were maybe ranked 8 in the country and they were ranked number 1. So again, first round of the tournament, and you're playing 1 versus 8 in a first round game, top 32. So they were undefeated. They hadn't lost all season, and we actually got to host them. And it was a really packed game. We ended up winning. We upset them. And what was really cool was that we broke an attendance record at Carthage. And as you guys know, it's not often that, girls sports are breaking attendance records. Usually we get a quarter of the fans that the boys are getting. So that was really cool to have, host the number 1 team in the country and upset them and go back to another Sweet 16. So that's another one that probably stands out. As far as coaching, one more, this is tough. We've had some good upsets. I did have a triple overtime game once against Oak Park River Forest. That was pretty fun. But I would say that last year, actually, we had a really big upset against Willowbrook, who's in our conference. And, that they're always a tough team. They're well coached. They get good kids. And they had won conference the year before, and they were currently in first place when we played them. And, we were, close to last in conference. And we ended up beating them by 2 points. And it was like a crazy down to the wire buzzer beater type game. And it was probably one of the biggest upsets we've pulled off at my high school. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, Coach, now you got me going through old memories of basketball games, but
let's go.
Gravely appreciate and dearly appreciate you being on. We had a lot of fun. Like Todd said in the beginning, we were really looking forward to this episode. We knew that you would bring some energy and some knowledge, and I learned a bunch of stuff that I'm going to now steal. But again, we really appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And, always like to hear your episodes, and, I could talk basketball for days.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the After the Timeout podcast. For more information and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. You can find all of our episodes on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts by searching After the Timeout. Thank you for listening.